It's not exactly the best anniversary present. As Nick Clegg marks 5 years as party leader, the Liberal Democrats came fourth in some polls, behind UKIP at 8%. This morning, Nick Clegg made a speech spelling out a new incarnation of muscular liberalism, what he called pragmatic liberalism.
If we are to become a more permanent fixture of government, then it will be, at least at first, as a partner in coalitions. That means embracing the realities of coalition government and becoming better and better at negotiating successfully on behalf of those in Britain who expect us to stand up for them. It means accepting compromise. It means putting up with people who object that we haven't got everything they wanted and who can't see the value in getting much, much more than we ever could get in opposition. Because that is the alternative. A retreat to the comfort and irrelevance of opposition.
And the Deputy Prime Minister had some specific examples of what that meant.
So we will be developing proposals that continue to hold down costs in a way that is fair to welfare claimants and to the other taxpayers who support them. Incentivise work by supporting childcare more effectively, extending conditionality for claimants and increasing access to education and training. Encourage those with health conditions to undergo treatment that will help them to get better. Support fairness by making clear that money should not be paid to those who don't need it. Looking again at universal benefits paid to the wealthiest pensioners, for example. Centre ground reforms from a centre ground party.
So does today's speech mark a new trend with the coalition parties being more open about how they form policies in government? Mark Pack is the co-editor of Lib Dem Voice. We've heard your party in the past saying that they need to differentiate themselves, make themselves seem more distinct than the Conservatives. Is this different today?
I think today was a natural evolution of, in fact, the sort of similar timed speech that Nick Clegg gave about a year ago. And, differentiation, we've seen an awful lot of it in the last year, partly thrown up by events such as things to do with the House of Lords reform, the cross-party committee report on the Snoopers bill and so on. But also it is a natural evolution that as we get closer to the next election, I think there's a scope for almost a twin-track differentiation, because it's not only the question about what is the party trying to do different from the Tories in government, but also what are the issues where both parties are preparing the ground to disagree with each other at the next general election.
Won't that appear somewhat disloyal, though, to your Conservative partners, as Nick Clegg today is outlining how he's fought off the Conservatives on a whole number of welfare cuts?
I think the relations between Nick Clegg and David Cameron are remarkably good compared to, say, the relations between Gordon Brown and Tony Blair. The idea of having two senior figures in government who have rather different agendas and don't always see eye to eye by any means is nothing new. What is new is because those two senior figures are in different parties, actually much more of that gets played out in public, on the record, with, speeches, quotes, names attached to it, rather than sort of, anonymous briefings we used to get under Labour.
But Nick Clegg certainly does need to come up with some kind of new strategy, doesn't he, given what's been happening to your party in the opinion polls? And I know you can blame midterm blues, da-de-da, but this is pretty bad, isn't it, coming fourth behind UKIP?
Certainly it'd be better if the Liberal Democrats were third or even second or first in the opinion polls rather than fourth. But I think it is significant in terms of understanding what the strategy is and the party's reaction to it, that if you look at those council by-elections in the seats where there are Liberal Democrat MPs, places like the Sutton Council, South West London by-election a week or so ago, a ward that sometimes in the past have been quite close between Lib Dems and Tories, and massive Liberal Democrat victory. And it's knowing that in those areas that really matter for the next general election result that the party support is holding up fairly well, that gives that confidence, I think, which underpins Clegg's speech.
Then there's the attack that he made on universal benefits, that richer pensioners shouldn't get free bus passes and so on. It's going to be hard for David Cameron, though, to change his mind about that. He made a specific pledge on it.
Indeed, which is why I think that's in part this sort of twin track differentiation, that what we will see is Clegg argue for that, Cameron say no, and then both go into the next general election with those positions sort of staked out in a way that I think will be rather more credible than if both of them pretended all through this Parliament that they agreed on the issue and then suddenly at the next election said, oh, look, we've actually got different views on it.
Mark Pack, co-editor of Lib Dem Voice, many thanks. So how much money would be saved by cutting benefits for older people? Paul Johnson is the director of the economic think tank, the Institute for Fiscal Studies. So just give us a sense, Paul, of what proportion of the total benefits bill is paid to pensioners.
Well, the total benefits bill is around £200 billion a year. That's nearly £1 in every 3 that government spends. Of that, about half, about £100 billion a year, goes to pensioners. And of that £100 billion a year, just about £2 or £3 billion go on what I think he's talking about when he refers to universal benefits, i.e. winter fuel payments and TV licences.
And if you ended those benefits, you wouldn't necessarily get all that money back, would you? Because there's a cost of means testing.
Well, if you ended them all together, then you'd get your 2 or 3 billion. If you means tested them, then you might get about half of the money back. But of course, in increasing the level of means testing, you get into that trade-off again, which means that the value of saving becomes that little bit less.
To what extent would you say that pensioners have been protected compared to other parts of society during the deficit reduction programme?
Well, in terms of the policies that the government has put in place, all of the welfare cuts, all of the social security cuts that have been put in place have affected those below state pension age. So the cuts to council tax benefit, the cuts to indexation, the cuts to housing benefit, the cuts to various disability benefits have only affected those below state pension age. There's one change only, really, which the government's put in place for pensioners, and that's to reduce the value of their income tax personal allowance. So overall, when you look at the government policies, pensioners have been significantly protected relative to the working age population.
So what other cuts or savings do you think the government could look at when it comes to pensioners versus the rest of the population?
Well, it's never easy, is it? Particularly where you've got a group who, once they hit pension age, certainly once they get a bit older, there's not much they can do about the level of income that they get. But the government deliberately put in place a more generous indexation procedure for pensioners, so their pensions go up by the higher of earnings prices, or 2.5%, which means that their benefits have been going up faster than those for the rest of the population, and indeed faster than the incomes of people in work.
Paul Johnson from the IFS, many thanks. Well, some Conservative MPs support Nick Clegg's idea to look again at universal benefits for wealthier pensioners. Robert Halfon is one of them. Why are you supporting this idea?
Well, I think there are 2 important principles here. First of all, we need to move away from a handout society to a hand-back society. And what I mean by that is stop universal benefits and benefits going to rich people and millionaires, and hand back people money through the taxation system, i.e. cutting taxes. And it is a crazy world that we're living in, that the Commission on Living Standards reports that the government spends about £500 million a year on winter fuel payments, free bus passes for pensions in millionaire households. And that just is unsustainable. There are pensions in my constituency on less than £10,000 a year income, and I would much rather those benefits, instead of being spread thinly to everyone, were actually focused on the poorest.
Of course, the arguments in favour of universal benefits go that it's actually quite a good way of getting the money to the people who need it most. Many old people like the idea of means testing, but if it's given to everybody, then they're very happy to take it.
Well, of course that argument is made, but many pensioners who are earning over, who have more than £10,000 income, fill out tax returns anyway. So it is easy for the government to do this kind of means testing. And it is wrong that people who are very wealthy are getting free bus passes when pensioners in my constituency are getting less than £10,000 a year. And I would much rather that we use that benefit reform and cut benefits to rich people, and used it both in forms of tax cuts, but also to ensure that the poorest pensioners got more.
There is the Conservative slogan, "We're all in this together," and to people in other parts of society it seems unfair that pensioners have been relatively protected when, for example, there's going to be a 1% cap on most benefits for working age people.
Well, as I say, I think we need to move away from handing out benefits to rich people. We need to move away from universal benefits. So it should be dependent on your income. And I want more benefits to go to poorer pensioners, to people who are really suffering and struggling, especially in the cold. And we have to re-look at the whole way we hand out the benefit system. I welcome the reform to the child benefit allowance, for example, for that precise reason. I realise there are anomalies, but the principle is right, that money should be focused on the poor and not go out to those people who are wealthy. Because don't forget, the people who pay these benefits, who pay the cost of them, are on the whole lower rate taxpayers who are earning less often than 25,000 a year.
The politics of this is tricky, though, isn't it? And if you look at David Cameron has made a pledge to keep these benefits in place until 2015. It would be very difficult. And again, his spokesman at the lobby was saying he's made this promise, he's going to stick to it. Quite hard to do a U-turn.
Well, you're right, because the problem is whenever anyone proposes these kind of reforms to say that benefits shouldn't go to rich people, our opponents, particularly the Labour Party, then go around saying we're taking benefits away from everyone, and pensioners then feel scared, understandably so. So we have to be very courageous in doing this. But I think that if the Prime Minister and the Chancellor got up and said we are going to focus the money on the poorest, it's not that we're cutting, we're just taking money away from the rich in order to give to the poor, then I think that, and that's why we have to change our manifesto commitment, I think then people would welcome that and understand it.
So you welcome what Nick Clegg had to say?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed, Robert Halfon.